teams of 3, Susan, to begin this. And then as Samantha and Mary join, they can jump into these 2 teams. Okay. So just the check-in tonight, I'm keen to, for you to, as a jumping off board, as you've noticed that we sometimes do with check-ins, we can just, check in with the question and then just use it to say whatever we need to arrive. So I invite you to do that if that's what works. So the check-in question is, do you experiment? How does this concept relate to how you work? And you can use it in any way you like. And you're going to, I will lead by example. So just checking in, just arrived back to Barcelona from a crazy trip with Susan to Israel, which was very experimental. I'm really having a funny day because I'm working with a client, who are totally in this and talked about how many hours and minutes were going to need to be spent to deliver that, and I was totally in shock for the first 20 minutes of the call, and I just really felt myself closing down and thinking, this feels so bad, there's so much potential, there's so much we could deliver, we probably would over deliver, but now my my enthusiasm's so being shut down, and it's been so long since I've been in this position. And I'm just so I think I was really holding, how can I hold my own integrity and culture around the way I want to work, given that I'm the so-called employee delivering on this contract here. I want to work, and how can I shift something? So I think my experiment is going to be to do what I can to learn from this employee type engagement, to see how I can play and deliver, quality work, and also shift something in how this relationship is going, because I just can so feel it's reducing the value, and I'm okay, time to experiment. So that's my check-in. Thanks, I'm in. Who's next? Big smile from you, Edson. Do you want to pop?
Can I be second?
I can go first.
Are we going to go? Yeah, okay, go ahead, Saraswati, and then Edson.
If you want to go second, Edson. So experimentation. Yeah, I think I'm just a generally really experimental person. I feel pretty close with experimentation in my personal life. I feel I'm very experimental, and I consider most of living to be a kind of trial run with lots of adjustments, and a lot of presence required. I don't think of myself as a static person. I think of myself as probably a growing, learning person who doesn't know everything and is kind of an idiot, just like everyone else, which has been really helpful framework. And then, in terms of my personal work, I work on a basic income, a decentralized basic income, which is a hugely experimental endeavor, and requires a lot of consideration and research in order to be experimental in a thoughtful and thorough way. And it's also a self-organized group creating this decentralized basic income. So I would say I got layers on layers going on. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. I'm super keen to talk to you further about circles as well.
Would love that.
Great. So who was Edson? Go ahead.
Okay. About experiment, I think I'm internally a very experimental person. So there is a phrase that I remember a girl told me a long time ago. She said that the only way to be free is in your mind, something like that. And I studied, I did a master in design, and there is a speculative design part where basically it's about how can we achieve innovation by imagining like just crazy futures, right? Like when you and when you start thinking just something like, oh yeah, that's impossible. But in this exercise, it's not about thinking about restrictions. It's just about brainstorming and thinking whatever it comes to your mind, and then just start prototyping, create something. And it's very fun because I didn't believe in this process at the beginning. I was like, okay, this is not true. I'm just wasting my time because I'm developer and I just want to make real things and okay, get things done. This is the way it works. But when I started to go into that world, I started to see different ways and paths to make to develop new products and services. So that was really good. Right now, I'm not experimenting that much, but in my free time, I try to do the most I can, and also I try to mix in my daily work when I can because we need to get things done. So finding the balance is a crazy thing. That's all.
Josh.
I can go. So yeah, experimentation is something that I've been embracing a lot more lately. And I'm realizing the benefit of just acting and measuring and then iterating on something as opposed to like thinking about it too much and just over planning or like assuming that people will behave in a certain way. It's like just start something, see how it goes, and then adjust and then iterate and yeah, keep going. So that's just like total experimentation, just real science. So I've been seeing the value in that. So I'm applying it to a lot more aspects in my team, like just how I engage with my team, but also like the product that we're building. Like, so with the Academy Next Developer course, like I'm just going to make adjustments to the course and get it out and then make updates throughout the course. Even though it's a 3-month-long course, like student experience may change. Last time I was reluctant to change the student experience over the 3 months. I wanted every student to have the same thing, but now I'm realizing that that might not be the best way to go. Get feedback in real time and then adjust. So if students are a little bit behind, they'll just get a better experience, and then the earlier students help. So yeah, realizing the benefit of experimentation.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure you're passing that through to these students as well in the curriculum somehow. And I'm also keen to talk to you further on this. I'm in a super enthused mood. Susan.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go on a slightly different tangent. Yeah, just like all of us, pretty much everything I do in my life and in my work is experimental. But a couple of things happened. One last week and one just today, when I'm working with teams and they don't quite get that everything I do is an experiment, and kind of ascribe either messiness, non-compliance, or fear of lack of an outcome because they don't quite get the whole iterative approach. So yeah, I'm working on a project with the New Zealand government and working with 3 companies. And one of the things that we tried, like Joshua and I have tried in the program, was an experiment, but the kind of people from the government didn't quite know that it was an experiment. They came back and said, oh, that's not what we asked for, but they didn't quite understand that we were actually also experimenting. So yeah, something around safety and being more explicit about it in a way that makes people feel safer if they're not already kind of comfortable with this approach to work. That's me.
Thanks for bringing the realness, Susan. Brian,
I could probably pop next if it's a good time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Kate. For me, yes, experimentation is a very comfortable space. I really enjoy it. and I'd say I typically seek out opportunities where a project or a company is in an experimental phase because it feels comfortable. Something I feel like I've been personally learning more is like how to embrace routines and healthy habits when experiments are yielding results instead of wanting to continue to experiment. So that's definitely something that isn't natural for me, but I understand is an important counterbalance. In terms of recent experiments, just formed an agreement with Victor and Donnie to maybe give a shot at using a framework that Pandora uses for strategic planning, which it kind of has some elements of it that remind me of the wise crowds method, but we're just seeking a scalable way to do roadmap planning and strategic planning where we can get more inclusive as the team grows. So that's something we'll try this week.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, Brian, for something around like when just wanting to say something more there. When a prototype's failed, how do we kill it? Thank you. Melky, do you want to go?
Sure. I guess experimentation for me would come in, I guess what I typically describe as creative thinking. With work, I'm generally very output oriented or like business minded, especially as of late as my career has continued to shape. But my first foray into in college, I actually was studying fashion design, and so art and design has always been that side of my brain has been a little dormant, but it used to be very active, and so that comes out with a lot of what Brian said and all the others too, just in developing products or strategic planning. To me, that all ties into this creative thinking, and I've never thought of it as experimenting, but I don't mind that as another way to frame it. But that's what I can think of to relate to.
Yeah, I think there's synergies there. Thank you. Tanya.
I feel like I can echo a lot of what everyone else has said. So I think from what Saraswati said, I would say from a personal perspective, I certainly am someone who is an ongoing experimenter and just in a way always experimenting in order to expand my mind, in order to expand my levels of consciousness and self-awareness. And the more woo-woo and wacky it is, probably the more chance you'll find me there experimenting with it. I would say that I think I've said it on calls before, when it comes to being in a group environment, I am still working through some old blocks and old trauma that comes from years of being in environments where everything is efficient and set up to be absolutely perfect, with no room for mistakes, with no room for creativity. And it's interesting because when I started traveling and I actually stopped working for a while, I started writing, and it was very interesting to me how like writing is so imperfect, and I'd had a deep fear of it for many, many years, and actually like removing the pressure and knowing that I could actually just experiment and play completely like unleashed this sort of like old talent that I had from when I was younger. It sort of came up out of nowhere. And I feel like in the short time I've been with Consensus, what I'm beginning to realize is that when we stop kind of attaching ourselves to everything being perfect, and And when we can just be like, okay, let's just create the first iteration of something. It can be anything. Okay, it's a newsletter. This time, the key, like the key is really just to get the newsletter out. It doesn't matter what's in it, just get it out. And then you focus on like the content. I don't know. I just feel like that process is just, yeah, there's so much more room for innovation and for creativity and new ideas to flourish. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Just before we go through a bit more content, I was wondering something around the question of, well, what if that's like the atmosphere that we want to be in and create? What does that mean about us as leaders? What kind of what does that mean about how we work together and the culture that we try to instigate? Because obviously, if you're working in like a waterfall based culture or approach, like the thing Susan's describing, and people are experimenting, those two just don't fit together. So I think I'd just love to have a quick discussion around like, what is the persona and the culture we need to bring in to actually make this work? And yeah, you're naming some there. Nice, Tanya. To be kind, to be open, to be incessantly curious. And what happens when these values actually hit up against, some of the hard business realities? Malky, do you want to comment on that?
I'm just really I love that you brought this up. I think that's awesome. And the way you framed that. I think that ultimately this is the balance that we're all trying to consider, right? In bringing this into not only our organization, but all of this, right? And I love what Tanya dropped there, those pieces. And I wonder how we can draw lines from those pieces of, whether it's more empathy or just more humanity, right, to these decisions. But how do we draw lines from that side to the product side, or to the outcome side? And I don't mean that from a I know I mentioned in my last thing that I'm like an output driven person, and as much as that's the case, and I've become more that way just as a product of places that I've worked, right, and like the system, if you will. But then also happen to have fallen in love with systems and processes, and so I've become more oriented that way. I mean that not only from a crazy like get things done point of view, but how do we balance that with the being productive and keeping things moving, right? And so to what all of you have said about iterating, but then to what end, right? Like where can we how can we design frameworks where not guardrails per se, but some sort of bumper, right? Where when it gets to the edge of this, we could say, okay, this decision feels productive enough to do X, right? And so I don't have an answer, but that's just sort of further elaborating on what you brought up. And I'm really glad to hear that coming up too, because actively that's something that I've been thinking about as someone who does think about, systems and processes like that, and where this the stuff that we've been discussing can come into that. So
cool. Yeah, I think that's great. This is super helpful because we are dealing with these realities. And it's great to be interested in outputs and focusing on that. And that is a need within teams.
I have one more quick. Can I do one more quick question? Sorry, just on a note, to Tanya's note. So, so there's parts of me that so much agree, but what I want to know is back to how Kate brought up, even when it is about a product and making money, right? Like that shouldn't, and maybe maybe I'm dreaming too big, right? But like that, wanting to be profitable shouldn't have to contradict working in a different kind of way. And so even with a desire to make money, which is not inherently bad, that's definitely a direction I'd be, and if maybe not for here, but I'd be very interested in from like a business point of view. Yeah, on to the others.
Yeah, thanks, Bucky. Yeah, keep bringing it. Because Brian was saying, iterating with high velocity to nowhere doesn't feel great. Yeah, and I totally agree with that. Like we do need some constraints and some frameworks to run our experiments in. Otherwise, it's kind of like doing mad science for a goal that may be achieved in 20 years. And there's very few people who can operate with that kind of thing. Does anyone else have a comment on this?
Yeah, I had a thought that's about like communication and about like the kind of, I mean, it's pretty contextual, but when you're with a purpose-driven group, there's this sort of like, I mean, typically in product, you do something like business analysis or competitive analysis of similar things, but I feel like there's this meta layer of research and an experiment, which is like what has existed prior to this that can serve as like a scaffolding for what we're about to embark on. That's like one layer. And then the other that's so important that I kind of feel like kind of went over consensus's head because of how fast it's scaled or how fast we've all scaled. I feel like, you know, there's this sort of initial communication around like what the new metrics are for success, for example, right? Like if we're experimenting, then there's definitely like still like a goal to surface and shore up in ourselves as to why. And there's like mutuality and agreements to form from finding that in each other. And I feel like that kind of can really carry things forward as a way to kind of come back to that litmus test. Like you still have something you're striving for, and that even may change. And maybe that's part of the framework is that like you revisit that. But I guess that would be my instinct.
Yeah, nice. I mean, it's totally valid. Like there will be like a whole plurality of metrics for every different spoken team and in the mesh as well. So that's another added layer of complexity. Does anyone else want to make a comment on this before we walk through some basics of prototyping and go into our groups? Specifically when the hard business demands and our need for outputs hit into the of experimentation and prototyping that we kind of need to work in this emergent kind of chaos driven way, which is the only kind of reality in my mind that's in this. How does that interface with business needs? Any last comments? Susan, do you want to say anything? Josh?
Yeah, I was thinking about communication as well. So yeah, I want to reiterate what Saraswati said. And communication within a team can help guide a team because we all have different perspectives on like what to experiment with, and then also like what the costs of experimentation are. Like I'm looking at upgrading the OpenEdX platform for distributing content for Academy, but we're also talking about migrating to a new one. So like just threw that idea out there, and then the people that are managing our DevOps people are like, wait, like let's hold off on this for a bit because this could be expensive. We don't know. Let's wait until these other decisions are made. So just like communicating across the team can help us determine, like basically put those guardrails up that say like, okay, let's like go this way and not this way right now. Let's reorient a little bit. So yeah, just emphasizing the importance of communication.
Totally, and just integrating our experimentation process with our rhythm, our cadence, our strategy as a team, how we communicate, how we work with other teams. Like it's all kind of part of the same thing. And some great comments coming down the side. Agree, not being able to celebrate learning, brackets failure, alongside success results in overly safe experimentation or innovation agile theatre.
I love that agile theater, Brian. I've seen that.
Yeah, I've also seen a lot of corporate innovation theater recently, where these innovation labs in large enterprise organizations that just don't seem to really be finding a path to delivering anything, which is very sad because some great ideas are dying there.
Yeah, I mean, my theory on that is it's this attachment to this idea of innovation without being willing to do the actual practice. I think that in my experience is one of the main drawbacks of accelerators as well. So focused on innovation and delivery of something unique at all costs without a lot of rigor around the practice or the actual viability of what's coming down the pike. It's almost like you said, either theater or performance for performance sake.
Okay, I think my background noise is a bit tricky and I'm cutting out a little bit, so just let me know. Sorry about this. So it sounds like, I mean, this check-in's being the perfect start to this conversation around prototyping, and it does seem like there's a lot of practical expertise in the room, so we don't need to go into too much detail. But if any of you looked at the reading for this week, you'll see that it's about prototyping. We're taking a lot from Theory U and the Otto Schwammer approach, but we've kind of we have our own kind of version of this at InSpiral. Just tell me if you're hearing me, because my screen is frozen.
You froze for a bit, but you're back.
I'll just pass to you, Susan. And then I'll reconnect with a different hotspot, and then I'll take it back. Okay.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure what Kate has in mind, so
prototyping.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not prepared.
Okay, I'm going to change over. Basically, think of the second day in Israel for online code. And I'm sharing you the slides now. Sorry, everyone. And okay.
Maybe Kate, maybe if you just mute your video and just talk.
Okay. Okay, let's try this. So, as I was saying, we kind of conceive of everything as a prototype or an experiment. I mean, we kind of use those terms interchangeably, which maybe isn't the best. But for example, our company is running an experiment on our business and marketing strategy right now until February, where we'll all meet up in New Zealand and review how we went with that, and whether from that, if we want to iterate and pivot completely the company, the marketing and business strategy of the company. So that's just one high level example. So I'm going to ask you to put everyone into groups, and I'll share the link to the instructions, and they also have the group assignment. So basically now the ask is just to go into your teams and start thinking about what you're going to prototype to show value or to show something about this course and to bring value to the mesh. So Susan, can you talk about some examples from PSM of prototypes?
Yeah, we've had prototypes around everything from the creation of our alumni group in that in the public course. So one of the teams actually took the lead of not only creating the alumni group, but hosting regular monthly kind of SO dojo type calls that they self-organized on the topics of their choice. There was another really neat prototype around study tours. So planning out across different countries, companies that would be willing to host other groups of people or even individuals to come and visit self-managing organizations. What were some of the other ones, Kate?
I think she hopped off to reconnect. I think that's what she had said.
Okay. Let me just add. Let me just put you into your rooms and wait till she comes back and let you guys start having conversations around what you think you might be able to prototype for the mesh this week. So I'm just going to open your rooms.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Hold on.
Yeah, I think.
Hold on. I've just put them in the rooms, but now I'm going to bring them back.
No, don't wait. Josh's face, cracking up. Okay, so I've changed over to the hotspot, and there's some Catalan people having a dinner party in the background. Say lovey.
So I shared a couple of the prototypes from PSM. One was the standing up of the alumni group.
I could hear you.
The other was the prototyping of the study tours. What other ones did they do?
So we did the alumni, the community, right, and the dojo with expert guests. Those are my favorites.
Yeah,
that was so much value. Was the community organized getting experts from self-management in every month to interview them on a certain topic, and did like a webinar. So I think those are some good examples to start with. So basically what we're asking you to do is similar. How can you, as the first pilot, create something that will deliver value around self-management to the mesh? So, and yeah, we're just going to apply basic prototyping principles. I'll share my screen. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Cool. Yay. Create something you can test in the mesh. Yay, Google Slides. So a prototype is a practical and tested mini version of what later could become a pilot project that can be shared and even scaled. So yeah, just keep that, and this is really important as you all are so busy. How can what you think of in your teams be really mini? And it may not become like a self-management dojo where the four of you are personally taking responsibility to host international experts every week, but it might be the start of that. Even like a survey to see if people are interested in this or something like that, or some marketing copy to test with users inside the mesh. So keep it small. So when you go into your groups, start completing. Basically, the ask is to start completing the group assignments this week, so you're getting a bit of a head start. So you could think of a tool or a practice or a concept that you've experienced in this workshop, or that someone else has talked about, or that you've just made up in the last week. So that's kind of where we're heading. Please work for me, Google Slides. I'm gonna exit full screen. So it's really important to clarify 2 core questions that you want to explore with your prototype. E.g., will the mesh start to trust more if, or can, something like a bit broad. So what questions are we exploring? And clarify 2 assumptions. So I think this will happen. So the assumptions that you're making about what might shift or about the behavior of the group. Think about your constraints. We're all distributed throughout the world. There's lack of trust or whatever they may be. I'm just totally making these up. And think about how you'll work together as a small team this week to produce and create something. And then obviously not on the call tonight, but throughout the week, design it. Think about how to integrate the questions and the assumptions and start designing. And think about how you can try to shift something with this experiment. Like what might happen? Hey, Thomas, we're just doing some explanations. So yeah, be very clear on those assumptions and observe what happens. And of course, as many of you have said, like the idea of this is to iterate, and this is just the very beginning. So what is the minimum viable part of a prototype or of an experiment? And I think it's key to draw it back to that, because we're really seeing the busyness and the load that you all have. So we want to make sure that our experiments do land by starting small. So Susan, yeah, if we want to just jump into groups, there's some very rough explanation in the instructions for this week. So just have a look at them, and they're purposely really like lean. There's not much detail in there, and we obviously expect you guys to work with it, and to have something like a very loose outline of what you're going to build on Friday this week.
How long in the rooms, Kate?
Till 10 past.
Okay, great. And when Samantha and Mary join, I'll add each of them to one of your rooms, so be prepared for that.
Susan, perhaps I'll brief them first and then we'll add them, okay?
Yeah, great.
I have one quick question or ask
Please.
before you put us off. If it's possible to make our groups for the week, whomever we are with at this breakout, so we can continue the conversation naturally. That's what we start.
Yeah.
Anything else? Cool, great, thank you. Okay, so do we lose Brian?
Yeah, so Brian, he sends his apologies, but his battery was dying. And yeah, he had to jump off.
No problem. I can't really be upset with anyone around their call quality tonight. Okay, so I'm really keen for 10 minutes to talk about assumptions and constraints that you were surfacing in your groups. We have Samantha. Hello. You look freezing.
Sorry, guys. It's been a doozy.
And Mary is here too. So you've obviously finished your meeting. Does anyone from the team want to give a quick update of what we've been doing?
I nominate Josh.
Okay. Is that cool, Josh?
Yeah, that's cool. So we are prototyping a tool, or we're building a tool or prototyping one about related to the course, something we've learned. Our team is focusing on a tool that can be used by SO101 participants to help maintain integrity and commitments within the group. So yeah, prototyping a product that's our group assignment this week.
Yeah, cool. So we've just been like starting the work already, just with some very basic content on prototypes, and it feels like the group's got a really high level of understanding of that. And perhaps Mary and Samantha, we can just ask you to check in with the question, which was really bringing up a lot of rich discussion. So do you experiment? How does this concept relate to how you work? And we use the check-in question quite broadly, and it was really rich. So go ahead, either of you. And I'll give you 20 seconds to think if you need. Or Mary, you ready?
No, I'm ready. Yeah, of course. Cool. I mean, designers, that's what we try to do, is just do something quickly and see what people think. So prototyping and experimenting are pretty common. Yeah. And then, analyzing and learning from it, fixing it, doing a better job the next time.
Yeah, totally. It's like the key thing of design, really, I suppose. Good to have you with us. Samantha, what do you think? Do you experiment?
Yeah, I experiment a lot. I think my entire existence at Consensus is an experiment. Fruitful one, though. I think that a lot of the different work streams and things that we're doing is an experiment because we aren't mandating anything. We're making suggestions on a better way to work. But what's fresh in my brain is onboarding. We're experimenting with trying to build onboarding into a product, but working with a bunch of individuals who may have a different perspective as to what it is that we're doing. So trying to get this working group together is an experiment. And how I work is I'll keep experimenting, and when I find blockers, I'll just go around them.
Nice. Yeah. And the other question we used afterwards was just to think about the kind of culture that is needed to have that kind of experimentation and for it actually to work, and then how that interfaces with business needs and need for output and those types of things. But we won't go into that now. Maybe just an invitation for you to think about it. Thanks, Thomas. Whose experiment is it?
Somebody. No idea.
What are they testing? Okay, so yeah, I'm keen to just jump into some of what we've been doing, Samantha and Mary, is in the groups. They were making sure to draw out the questions they're trying to answer with the prototype or experiment, and the assumptions that people always make we make when we start experimenting. Like we have like a whole list of the things we think about the world, and we always operate with that. And obviously there's constraints and assumptions. What is coming up for people in the groups around the mesh? I'd love to hear a bit more. So anyone from either of the two teams, what assumptions were you banging into and what constraints are you operating in?
That's to do with this prototyping exercise.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, exactly. So as we make our prototypes, one of the question was to make sure you're really clear on the constraints that you're designing the prototype within. So that might be, Mira can talk a lot about constraints within like design thinking practice, but we have, if you're designing an experiment for, let's say, the SO101 users, what are the constraints that you're going to be facing? And now they're going to countries, they're going to be using Zoom all online, they're going to be, so many of the constraints that also apply to people in the mesh will be applying to SO101 participants. And then therefore, what does that mean around what you can do in your prototype? So that's a bit more detail on assumptions. On constraints. And assumptions are like the things that we think are true, that we don't really know, that we always incorporate into our experiments and prototypes. So there was an invitation to make sure you're clear on both of those things as you design your prototype, so that you can go back. That's like the base level, some of the base level for testing. So maybe we can just focus on constraints. So for the SO101 experiment, as it's taking shape, what other constraints were you thinking of?
Bandwidth.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, bandwidth. We just started writing them down the document at the top now, but we've just written down so far our team. People have limited time, bandwidth. So there's time zones. I think a big one, and this is why I've got RAC on Friday, by the way, and it's about enabling internet service providers to build mesh networks. Or put mesh networks first, and that will solve all our connectivity needs, so that you've got multiple forms of connection wherever you are. And that's really about so it's basically connectivity is a big constraint in this world at the moment still. So bandwidth, connectivity. Oh, it's interesting. It's all the same thing, really. It's communication channels.
Yeah, just is there any really particular constraints that have already come up around what you're thinking for something you might design for the SO101 participants? Or are they all quite broad?
I was on Thomas's team, and I guess we really kind of intrinsically acknowledge constraints, because we all are now just wrapped up in the understanding that we have a week and have done this a few times, so we didn't actually openly acknowledge constraints, but we do have a kind of pie in the sky vision for something that we would do that's much larger than what we've chosen to do based off of our kind of inherently understood limited time. to execute. So maybe like, and then also that to execute and be able to communicate to the rest of the group. So maybe like those things are just a little bit inherent in what we've been doing already, just because of the nature of being in this for a while now.
Great, yeah, and also you're bringing in internal constraints, like the constraints of your team and achieving what you commit to.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm part of the same group. We definitely went in our prototype. We went very, very people that people we but it's everything, the constraints and assumptions. So
this is going to be so helpful as we redesign this course together. Yeah.
There's also this really cute constraint that's coming up right now where none of us in the group is revealing what we're doing. So we're constraining our actual telling you what we're cute. Like all of us seem to have just secretly agreed to not tell you.
Yeah, and we've sensed into that, and we're not going to push you. Surprise us.
Yeah.
So anyone from the other, Edson and Josh, were you on the team?
No, Tanya.
What were you saying? You don't have to talk about constraints, but what was emerging?
I feel like yeah, it echoes what Thomas was saying around like communication and like surfacing this information to the wider mesh, and then also that the piece around like you can surface all of this information, but how do you actually engage people who are short of time, whose attention spans might be like 30 seconds, considering like we're also so busy with other projects that are more important. Or sorry, hold on. That was like a really bad turn of phrase, but for other people, their projects, they might perceive their projects to be more important than sort of talking about how we organize ourselves. So yeah, it's kind of like, I feel like there are some, there's some assumptions that like maybe, like how do we surface this information in a way that's really non-threatening and enjoyable to read and gets people going, oh, like that's really cool, I want to know more. And Edson might be able to add.
Yeah, Brian was suggesting in our conversation for the prototyping and the experiment, try to make interviews to people and then write down an article. And he was referring to talking to people within the mesh with knowledge of self-organizing. And but we were brainstorming, and we mentioned that it would be nice just to randomly select anybody and ask a set of questions that we've been learning during this course, just to see what people is talking, it knows about it. And also we were trying to think in different mediums to communicate the self-organizing idea. We also mentioned like the memes and how these small images can be fun and attract people. So it would be nice to find different mediums.
Great. There's so much meshiness coming through in the thinking. So what we're going to do now is invite Samantha and Mary into both of those teams and give you the rest of the time together in rooms and ask you to check out yourselves, just because we're in the prototyping mode. We might as well keep going. There's richness coming through. We might as well use the rest of this time to be productive. Thomas?
Oh, I just had a breakthrough. I mean, just a realization, nothing to do with me. But I like it's been very difficult to do the homework, all the time and make it important. And I feel like, just the way we do have this session, like it's worth setting the time inside these calls to do the homework. Then people that just, that they go through it, maybe only have, that's what I'm suggesting, maybe not every week, but maybe for the first 2 or 3 weeks, and then say, look, now I'm going to make it onus on you. I don't know. Like, it's just like, then there's going to be some more power there to hold people in the course for a period of time.
Yeah, I mean, that's like that has been something that we've done, is we always took at least 20 minutes at the end of calls to start doing the homework. But I don't know, you guys are just so cool, and there was so much richness in the conversation. We never seemed to quite have enough time to do that, but it's really good feedback, Thomas. Thanks.
Yeah, I think we could reintegrate that. And so just the last message from us is that we are starting to do this retrospecting co-creation aspect, and I'll be trying to talk to as many of you as I can to get in-depth feedback after the retrospective call that we've put in your calendars next week, which I don't know if everyone can come to. So this is exactly what we want for that. So thanks, Thomas. And we're just going to be like just doing this, like give it to us, bring it on, like anything that comes up is going to be helpful. So like calling in that right here and right now. And for the rest of tonight, jumping back into those teams and check out. Susan?
Yeah, just one more thing I wanted to remind everybody of is one of the commitments at the beginning of the course was to somehow share a personal reflection in any format you want. So please still do keep thinking about how you might want to do that. It can just be a Zoom video recording conversation between the two of you, or more of you, something written, something drawn, just something as an artifact of your experience, of your personal individual experience on the course.
Cool. And Samantha and Mary have a request for starting to integrate feedback into the course. So I don't think maybe if you want to do that in your teams as well, just do 5 minutes at the end before you check out on feedback around this core and the content that we're covering. And maybe Samantha and Mary, you'll be in different teams. So if you could capture that and start feeding it back into your process, that would be great.
Wonderful. All right. See everybody on Friday. Have fun. Look forward to what you guys come up with. See you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.